Ladies and gentlemen, thank you ever so much for coming this afternoon. We're really grateful for your time. I'm sorry this is slightly intimidatory. It's not meant to be. The purpose of this session is to gather evidence for our report that we're writing on fisheries and Brexit. So fisheries in a Brexit context, understanding that the future after the 29th of March is certainly exciting for the sector, but also potentially offers some challenges, and it's those particularly we'd like to explore with you this afternoon, the better to inform the report that we will produce that ultimately will land up on ministers' desks and be debated in the House of Commons. Can I ask you very briefly just to introduce yourselves and say where you're coming from, and perhaps very briefly say what you think the prospects are for Brexit, for your sector, and also a little bit about where you think the threats may lie. Sharon, can we start with you?
Okay, my name is Sharon McMahon. I'm the designated officer currently for the Lotte Agency, which is, as you are aware, a cross-border body set up under the Good Friday Agreement. For us, the Lotte Agency's predecessor was the Foyle Fisheries Commission, which was established in 1952. So we were there pre-EU and pre the Good Friday Agreement. The Good Friday Agreement strengthened the Foyle Fisheries Act, which allows us to manage on a cross-border basis. We have been funded 50-50 since 1952 by two governments to manage Loch Foyle, and since the Good Friday Agreement, Carlingford Loch as well. So for us, Brexit, for now, we don't see any difficulties. We have our laws. We will continue to manage as we have done since 1952. We have the powers to enforce legislation on both sides of the border. So if there's a pollution event that happens in Lifford and you live in Strabane, we can prosecute you by domicile, even though the offence has happened technically in another country. So those laws will still remain in place after Brexit. The threat for us possibly is the environmental regs when the diversion, starts to, if it happens. I know that the UK have committed that they will, with the Great Repeal Bill, that all EU laws will be put into domestic law. But even there, for us now, we're currently working with organisations in Ireland, Northern Ireland and the UK to establish best practice in fisheries management, as we have done since '52. We also have established links internationally, for example, with NASCO, the North Atlantic Salmon Conservation Organisation. We're a member of that. We attend that with both the Irish and the British delegation. So we attend that as well. So we're working on the positives of Brexit. We're trying to move things forward, and I suppose the funding would be the one thing where we see, if it goes, where do we go? Because the more we are funded 50-50, our core budget and our core remit will still continue. The funding from Europe always enhanced and was an additional source of money to help us deliver our core objectives. So we have done several tourism projects very successfully in Benoan, the Ark building in Benoan Beach. We delivered that, the Foyle Marina at the back of the Guildhall in Derry, Londonderry, and we have also did considerable work in Malin Head. We also had about, I think it was 6 or 7 million of funding that allowed us to work with Scotland, Glasgow University and Queen's, where we got 70 years of research in 3 years. We put through 17 PhDs and 20 masters. So that was all from Europe. That money allowed us to do that, and we will miss that if it goes. But we're being positive. We're out looking for other sources of funding. Just recently we were talking to the Prince's Trust yesterday actually. We're working with Cooperation Ireland. We're looking at Heritage Lottery money. So we are being positive and getting out there.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. I represent Loughney Fishermen's Cooperative. I suppose I'm somewhat, possibly not at odds, but somewhat different to the views taken by my co-panelists here, insofar as we're not connected with marine fisheries. It's an inland fishery. And I would assess that probably the majority of our fishermen actually voted to stay within the EU, and hopefully in the next couple of minutes I can explain why that would be. So it is a slightly different view from what the others might have. Brexit will obviously mean changes for everyone, down to the level of trade and doing business in terms of exports and so on. And we will have to face those same issues alongside everyone else. But in addition to that, we have an extra hurdle, if you like. I should say at the outset that whilst I represent the fishermen of Lotte, I've never been a fisherman myself, but I have been involved with the cooperative for 30 years. The issue for us is related to the fact that the European eel is listed by CITES as an endangered species, CITES being the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. So as a result of Brexit, or consequential to Brexit, then there will be major issues to be resolved there to facilitate Lotte in the continuance of exports, or in fact of any sort of trade in eels, either in juvenile eels which we import for supplementary restocking purposes, or in the export of live eel or eel meat to European countries. And perhaps I should put that in context by explaining that Lotte actually is home to the largest wild eel fishery in Europe. Lotte, as you know, is the largest freshwater lake in the British Isles. It is renowned for its eel industry. The cooperative's involvement with that extends back over 50 years now. The cooperative was established in 1965. Prior to that, ownership of the fishing rights on Lotte were contested on many, many occasions over the last 100 years or more. Most famously back in 1911 when a case went all the way to the House of Lords and basically upheld the ownership rights, which could be traced back to Charles II in 1661. But there has been quite troubled history, I suppose, on Lotte in relation to the ownership. But we are where we are now. In the past 50 years, the cooperative has been responsible for the management of the eel industry in Lotte, and has been quite successful at that, I should say. And now things look to be becoming very difficult for us. Referring back to the impact of Brexit in relation to CITES, so far as we can discern at this point in time, the minimum that we will be required to produce is what's known as a non-detriment finding, an NDF, which is effectively a licence to allow us to continue to trade in eels. Now, that decision will be made by, with the help of scientific research review groups, European scientists. And the relevance of that within the context of Lotte is that we're dealing here with a species which is described as pan-mintic, in that it's a single stock found all throughout Europe. So where there's an impact in one region that's likely to have a knock-on effect in others, then that becomes an issue. Where we are at this point in time within Europe, we are required to meet the requirements of what's known as an eel management plan, and all river basin districts throughout Europe which have an eel fishery are required to have an approved plan, and obviously to remain compliant with it. I should stress that when these plans were introduced back in 2010 on the back of EC Regulation 1100 in 2007, probably it's fair to say that the fishermen in Lotte did not notice a great deal of difference as a result of introduction of those regulations, and I'll explain to you very briefly why that might be. Under the management of the cooperative, the eel fishermen in Lough Neagh had agreed many decades ago to self-regulate to the extent that they had always a very keen eye to conservation and proper management of their fishery. I'm speaking of such issues as a cap on the number of licences, for example, a daily quota, which is unheard of in the eel industry across Europe, and various other, a whole raft of other conservation measures. And whenever this was under discussion in Brussels, the regime, if you like to call it that, on Lough Neagh, or the means by which they managed their fishery, was actually held up as a model of good practice, to the extent that many of the measures that we had in place for the previous 40, 50 years were being promoted as something that other river basin districts should adopt. And basically that was the case. Now the other side of that particular coin was, because this was what was being asked of all fisheries, because the fishermen and the cooperative in Lough Neagh were already doing that, then there was no noticeable impact. Now, in terms of post-Brexit, yeah, this non-detriment finding is likely to prove a very serious issue. For example, we understand at this point in time, come the 29th of March, and if CITES decide that they cannot afford to issue an NDF, then that stops. As sudden as that, it is a cliff edge for us, and that's a whole huge concern for us. Yeah, well, currently about 80%. 80% of are exported primarily to Holland. Some of those will in turn be forwarded into northern Germany and Belgium. There is no local trade really for eels within the island of Ireland or within the UK either.
And the rest would go through Billingsgate.
Billingsgate.
Yeah.
There's approximately 20% of our total throughput goes into Billingsgate for the jelly eel trade. It's a very traditional trade, particularly as I understand it in the East End of London. But the vast majority of our fish are exported to Holland. And I've referred to the NDF that we as an exporter would have to produce. We're also told that our customers and clients within mainland Europe would have to prepare and have approved a similar document to allow them to import from us. And the essence of those two documents is to show that by continuing in that trade, that neither party is having a further detrimental impact on the stocks of eels within European waters.
With Canadian lobster
Yeah.
into Europe, outside the EU, trading with the EU. It isn't rocket science. It's bureaucracy, necessary bureaucracy, a large degree, but it's common practice with other products across the world.
My concern with that is that we're not being advised of, for example, what an NDF should contain, what it looks like, what we need to prove to make that workable. My understanding is that NDFs...
My worry in a lot of this stuff is, and I understand you're coming from a place of certainty and it looks uncertain. A lot of this stuff all sounds to me like the Millennium Bug thing, where we've been told there's going to be this huge big problem and then it doesn't actually materialise in real life. And I think that you need to get that better advice, and I think it's up to the department to give you what it should look like. I think there's definitely an impediment on you receiving that at the moment, but I think you need to get that better advice. But I think the problem of the black hole that is there is largely a figment. I don't think it's going to be like that.
I'm sorry, but I'm trying to disagree with you on that. I have attended meetings in Brussels in association with the department and also scientific representatives, and we've met CITES representatives and DG Murray and all of these people on a few occasions now, and I don't think anybody, including the department, is clear about whether an NDF is even possible.
So as I understand it, the issue with eels is that you can exchange these creatures within a particular recognised block, which clearly the European Union is.
Yes.
But if you're exchanging them between what will be characterised as a third
country,
party,
yes.
And the European Union being the bloc. That requires the certification that you have described. Is that right?
That's correct, because effectively since 2010, the eel management plans that have been approved throughout Europe are the basis, or effectively a licence to trade in eels within the EU.
And what makes this different from the Canadian experience, of course, is we're dealing with a potentially fractious period in which the European Union may not necessarily be cooperative on a number of small, what will be seen as relatively small areas of trade, commercial discourse in the immediate Brexit period, and I suppose really. Yes, it is. That's the problem. That's why we have to have this block arrangement.
That's correct, but
would that be right?
Yes.
So I suspect that's probably where your concerns lie.
That's where the concern lies. The EU as an entity itself is obviously a signatory to CITES, but so too is the UK.
Do you not have protection, EU protection? Does that give you any hope and succour perhaps in where we are?
Effectively, that operates as a protected food name as such, and it does recognise the authenticity and the connection with the local geographical region, and indeed with the traditions and the expertise of a fishing community, if you like, and we have held that since 2011. It's more of a unique selling point in many ways, rather than something that we can rely on to make changes. But the point I would like to stress here is that, and I think this is a position of strength for the UK government, in the sense that not only are we the largest wild eel fishery in Europe, but we have a proven track record as a net contributor to the species across Europe. We have been able to draw down funds, for example, under the old EFF as it was, and now the EMFF, for restocking purposes. You may be aware that
Pat, can I interrupt you? I think what we're going to do is come back to eels in a minute.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to work along the table to Andrew and Jimmy, and you can be clear, quite certain that we're going to be coming back to eels very shortly. So, Andrew, can I pass over to you?
Well, I'm Andrew Orr. I'm a skipper of a fishing boat. I'm a partner with two bros. We own a couple of smaller boats, and we're just hoping that if Brexit's done properly, that'll be good for the fishing. That we should get more quotas and bring more benefit back to our community. We would like to bring more fish back to our factories, and we'd like to build the whole industry back up to what it used to be. So we're hoping if it's done properly, it'll be good. And I think that's up to politicians then to do it right for us. We're there to take advantage of it when it's done, but it should be good for the fishing,
Andrew,
for the fishing boats.
Can I ask you where you fish, where far out do you go?
We fish mackerel up round Scotland and Shetlands and down. Sometimes, this last while, it's mostly been in British waters. We haven't very seldom been out of British waters. The way the fish is schooling at the moment. So we fish REC herrings. It's all in British waters we fish.
And you're not allowed to go into Irish Republic waters?
We're not allowed inside their 12-mile limit due to our size. And now our smaller boats aren't allowed inside their 6-mile limit because there used to be a gentleman's agreement, Voisinage agreement. And it's been so... Well, I actually had a small boat and I had to sell it because we couldn't fish down there.
And most
there's
of
a lot of young, smaller boats is really under pressure in Kilkeel because of the Voisinage.
Yeah. So, do you think we had the Fisheries Minister give evidence to the committee on this and raised it with him? Do you think the UK government should be being tougher on this in terms of reciprocating?
The British government hasn't said a word about the Voisinage agreement, to my knowledge. So they're talking about a hard border. We have a hard border.
Yeah.
It's there. It's not.
To be fair, they actually have. And last week I had a question to George Eustace on the Voisinage agreement. It's something we bring up with them all the time. I mean, I don't think that's been forgotten about because it hasn't been.
But I mean, the Minister responded to us quite openly that they were going to be perhaps having to get tougher.
Exactly. They're going to assert that. And
it's very difficult in Kilkeel for the small boats.
Yeah.
They can't fish their lobster pots, their crabs, their prawns. It's a very difficult time for them at the moment.
I mean, a reciprocal agreement is not as reciprocal if two sides aren't doing it. Therefore, surely, automatically, it should be not happening.
Well, we aren't restricting, to my knowledge,
No,
we aren't restricting any Irish boats from fishing in our water.
Okay, I'm sure we're going to come back to Western Irish too. So finally, Jimmy, you're at the other end of the scale, I think, because you're the skipper of a relatively small
7-metre crab vessel, which at the moment I'm targeting Wilkes, because there's the seasonal fishery with the lobster and crab, and the crab will turn in later in the year. If it wasn't for the Wilkes fishery, the small boats this year would have had a very, very poor year. Some are finding it extremely tough, especially as Andrew has been saying, in Kilkeel, where basically half their traditional fishing area has been taken from them, and basically that means that the pots that they would have been putting up along the Louth coast is now in the County Down shore, which is creating possibly a bit of a tight squeeze in places. The inshore sector as a whole, the under 10 metre, since devolution, there was, prior to devolution, there was a quota where we could have diversified to mackerel or live or whatever the case may be. There was a tonnage there that could have been divided fairly among the small boats to give you a living. Since devolution, we're down to about 50 kilo for each species, a box. You can't make a living at that. So because Northern Ireland as such had no, up to recent years, no small vessels, we had no track record, so to speak. So when devolution took place, basically what was the quota in the UK pool disappeared from us, and left us no option but to concentrate on either shellfish of some description. It is impossible. I've left the industry commercially for about 20 years and come back. It was impossible for me to finance a vessel, a licence, and get quota to fish. I would have needed well over £500,000 to buy basically scrap. And what bank's going to give that to you after the experiences they've had in the past? So going to the crab fishery was the only option left to me.
Thank you. That certainly ties in with some of the stuff we've been hearing about this morning. I'm going to start off by asking our host for the day, Jim Shannon, whose lovely constituency this is. And I think perhaps I'd just say in passing thank you also to everybody who's made this evidence gathering session possible. Most grateful to them, but particularly to Jim for his hospitality. Over to you, Jim.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's always a pleasure to bring people to the most beautiful constituency in the whole of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and I'm more than I'm greatly encouraged that you all think the same as I do now. That's wonderful, you know. I have a couple of questions if I could. I'll start with James and Andrew perhaps first. Very clearly today we've had a chance to visit Portavogie. We understand the key issues, the issues of crew, the issues of quota, and the Vibrancy agreement, which I'll tell you right now, Andrew, we have not forgotten about that. The Minister, George Eustace, has not forgotten about that. Be very clear about it. We push him on that all the time. He comes back with and the United Kingdom government are going to assert themselves in relation to that legally. It's part of the process of where we're moving to, and I don't think we forgot about that. But when it comes to the future of the 10 metre boats, we got a chance to go on one of those days. Aaron Palmer's down in the village today and on the harbour, and he's put a fairly big investment into what he's got there. You know, again, maybe you could just explain to us and explain to the committee, James, very quickly, and Andrew as well, what the issues are for the 10 metre boats, maybe as against the bigger factor. But you do say, and again, just to give you a heads up on the quota issue, Brexit, extra quota.
We're hoping, as it stands, I think there's an article in today's Times that basically about 60% of UK quota is in foreign ownership or care at the minute, right? As some of you know, I've been deep sea for a number of years recently, and west of Clare, oil field west of Shetland, along the continental ridge in UK waters, all you see is foreign vessels, with the exception of maybe Andrew and them at times. You look at the raider, it's Portuguese, Spanish, Faroese, Norwegian, in our waters, taking our fish. You go round Donegal, you speak to the Killybegs men. They're tied up, no quota, but yet the Dutch and Portuguese is fishing 12 mile off the shore. Something needs to change.
Well, in your opinion, as dependent upon fishing for your livelihood and for your family's livelihood, do you see Brexit, if done correctly, as an opportunity?
A great opportunity, if properly managed, and all UK quota. And I would say all, general opinion is the British Isles as a whole, both north and south, all quota brought back into the pot, so to speak. Now, both POs here in the north have done a great job managing the quota. They have kept the Northern Ireland fleet fishing when some other POs had none left. Over time, the fleet, as it stands at the minute, you've seen Portavogie this morning. Basically, we relied on second-hand vessels that had used their lifespan in the North Sea to come to the north. Those vessels, a lot were scrapped by the banks, and instead of the boats that was eligible to be scrapped put into like some secure harbour, and we could have took a fresher boat out of it and scrapped an older boat in Northern Ireland. The good boats that should have come to Northern Ireland or been available to come to them are no longer. It is impossible, with a rare exception of somebody that is excess to £3 or £4 million, to build a new 24-metre trawler here in Northern Ireland. It's impossible. You couldn't fund it. You couldn't pay it.
But you'd be very hopeful that with Brexit and with having control of our own waters again, that all that comes back at the quotas.
The quotas
means
you would have the
you're not
opportunity.
going to be tied to the shore so many days a year when you can't go out because
you would have more opportunity, and hopefully the banks would see that opportunity and back you.
I think it's important what he said. That small boat I spoke about, when I bought it 10 years ago, we weren't devolution, so we had the same quota as the English, the Welsh, the Scotch. About a year later, it was all devolution, and then we had a very small quota of whitefish. If we could get that back, at least our little boats can diversify from the crabs and the prawns and do something else.
Go ahead, Robert.
One point that Jim made, you made the point that there's a lot of Spanish and Portuguese vessels fishing in British waters. Are they skippers who bought quota from British vessels that have sold it to them?
I personally couldn't answer that. I'm not into the OK.
Some, if they're British registered, they have done. If they're British registered flagships, they will have done. But there'll be Spanish ones there on their own quotas.
Now, in recent months, I'm led to believe that there has been a lot of foreign investment into UK quota for the fear of Brexit. That's why I would like to see whoever's in control of the fishing take basically ownership of the quota, but letting it
makes it very difficult for local people to buy the quota because there's big corporations buying up the quota from outside the UK, and it makes it very difficult for ordinary people to get a stake.
I think you need to be assured, gentlemen, and this committee and members of this committee will assure you as well, that we are taking back control of fishing, and we will try to deliver those things with a minister who's sympathetic and wants to see that happen. The other key issue come out of the Portavogie visit today, and it's one of the committee's very aware of, is the issue of crews. Now, it may not be as big an issue for you for the 10-metre, under 10-metre boats, but you still have to go to sea with at least 2 or possibly three crew. Portavogie today, the guys were telling us, with a few exceptions, that crews are almost are extremely difficult to recruit locally. for many reasons. Now, one of the options that we're looking at through this committee, and obviously we're looking at it as individuals as well, and the opportunity is the Filipino fishermen and having a visa exception at Tier 2 because we believe they're skilled, and that would put them into a different category. Could you give us your thoughts upon the crew issues and how important they would be to the fishing sector, please?
The fishing industry is absolutely no good unless there's crew. And you have to look after your crew. You have to make sure your crew has a decent wage, or nobody wants to go to the fishing. We can get all the quota, all the boats, and all the grants and all the money, but if you can't have an environment where you can have crew to crew the boats are worthless. The quota is worthless. You need crew, and I think the government should maybe do something to try and encourage local people to go back to fishing, or local young ones. The seafarers that are offshore, they get a tax break. What's the difference if you're 180 days at sea in a fishing boat? Now we have to go outside 12-mile limit, or else you lose your Filipino crew. So if we're outside 12-mile limit, why can we not get tax allowances for our crews to encourage young people to come to it? We can't go to sea without the Filipinos at the minute. We have 2 boats relying on Filipinos. If we had other boats we had to sell because we just couldn't get crews.
As it stands at the minute, there is no, with the exception of the Sea Fish office in Portavogie, which puts them through their basic training, there is no nautical college. If you want to proceed to get your certificate, you have 2 choices. You either go to England, or you go to the Donegal, or down next Cork. There used to be a college in Jordanstown that's been shut. There used to be schools in the evenings in Portavogie where you went on a Friday evening and a Saturday and you done the exams as you qualified. There needs to be some input put back into the education in the schools. Make it encouragement to go to sea. Years ago there was a youth training programme that was the last 30 years ago.
You need to get the people making money. Nobody's going to work for buttons. They can get buttons ashore. They need to make more money. You have to create an industry where the crew's getting. I want my brother's got a fancy car or a house. I want to be able to go there and make the same money as him. You have to. And you knew what the fishing was like 30, 40 years ago. It was a boom time. Everybody was going to the fishing, from Belfast, from everywhere. We need to create an industry. It's maybe not a gold mine, but a bit of a boom that encourages people to leave school and go to it and invest in it.
2020, you'll be wanting to see things very, very differently.
I was disappointed the way over the 2-year transition period was put in. If we're going to the vast majority, where you like it or where you don't, but democracy is a wonderful thing. If you vote to leave, you leave. Why we should be held to ransom by Europe beats me. Why we have to negotiate with them. We're leaving. We're going in 3 months by. Yes, it will be painful. Yes, there will be changes. And yes, as they're doing at the minute, they are trying to hurt the UK.
So they are.
Every way possible, they are trying to drag their heels to make it painful. And when this happens, and it'll be painful for us, like what they were saying here with eels, my whelks goes to the Republic. We'll need a vet certificate to get them across the border because it's shellfish. Same with certain other types of shellfish. We're going to have to take that pain in the chin. But if the government supports us, allows the quota, and starts reinvesting in their industry, if this nation was at war, we couldn't feed it now. World War II, the fleet fed the country. There's nothing. We need to start again, back to basics.
Government has indicated that they wish to retain the grant system which that Europe was pumping into the Portavogie Harbour, Ardglass and also Kilkeel, and they've given that commitment to the end of this term of government to do similar things. How would you see that the grant aid or the assistance, maybe they have new boats to encourage young people to go into the industry, into the sector? How would you see that happening? Or what would you like to see government making sure would happen?
Well, it's easy, scrap and build was a thing, but to build a boat now is a lot of money. You should get a very small boat for £1 million. I think they're £2-3 million for a whitefish boat now. A pelagic trawler. I have a 20-year-old pelagic trawler. if you were to build a new one, you're talking 18, 20 million pound. We could not. On our quotas, we just cannot finance that.
But quotas might help you to do that, is that right? Extra quotas?
It would take a big lift in it to finance a new boat.
Well, a big lift if we control the waters.
Even for youngsters coming into even if they wanted to go to the inshore krill fishery, right? A small Cygnus 21 such as mine's today, or what's been built in Kirkeel, it's 70,000 for the hull at least. Then you have your licence, 25 on it.
Well, at least.
So for the boat and licence, 100. Then you have to buy your krills. So you're talking about 120,000 just to start basic to get back to the fishing. What kid can do that at the minute without some type? Shetland has the oil revenue. They have a pool of money there that the Shetland Council helps. In the Republic at the minute, they were backing young fishermen if they'd been at the fishing for 5 years. 25% of the boat. That's not available here.
You need some good ideas. Just to ask the other two panel members, or I could a couple of quick questions. Maybe for yourself, Sharon, and the Lotte agency. Looking forward to Brexit 2019, March 2019, and you were quite clear with you're a cross-border body who work both sides of the border in a constructive and cooperative fashion. Can I ask what you see the future post-Brexit in relation to how that relationship will work?
Well, the relationship, as I said, has been there since '52, and for me personally, within the Lotte agency, I've been there for 4 years, and working in North-South cooperation. I've been there since 2002 with Waterways Ireland as well. So for us, the relationship is, for our survival, the relationship north-south and east-west is paramount. So we depend on the relationship of our sponsor departments here in the north and in the south. They work quite closely with us and through the North-South Ministerial Council. So for us, it's paramount that relationships are maintained. And to be honest, I don't see any sign of that relationship breaking down, because we have been working so well cross-border for years. You know, it's not something new to us, and we sort of be amazed when people ask us that about Brexit in particular, because we do it day to day and have been for years and think nothing of it.
It's rather refreshing, Sharon, to have someone who doesn't see it as an obstruction, that can prove that it's worked already, and therefore that shouldn't change. You know. Thanks very much. And Pat, very quickly, in relation to the eels, and you described that the issue very clearly early on. I believe because of the protected status that you have, that government will be keen to work alongside with you, Mr. Chairman, to ensure that any perceived difficulties that you think there may be will not become difficulties. Can I say very gently to you that sometimes, like my colleague across the way just referred to, life isn't all negatives. Life's about solutions. So if we focus on the solutions and the way forward, we can find a way to go forward. Can I ask you, is that something that you're seriously looking at? Finding the solutions to move forward?
Absolutely, it is. I mean, we're determined to secure a future for the fishermen of Lough Neagh. We're not talking about a handful of fishermen. We're talking about 250 odd fishermen in an important industry. You know, I think everyone should understand we're not, with no disrespect, but we're not an aquaculture unit. We are a wild eel fishery, an important element, an important part of a broader fishery across Europe. I'm disappointed to hear you suggest that maybe we're a bit negative about it. I think we're far from it. We are looking for solutions, but we are very aware of the constraints that are out there and how things look for us. We're all too well aware that, for example, effectively since 2010 we have been operating under licence from Europe. And I take your point about the PGI status, and we're proud to have that. And in fact, we added to that within the past 2 months with a further accreditation for another species found in Lough Neagh, namely Lough Neagh pollen. And those are great attributes to have. But most important of all, I think, in the context of this discussion, I think that those issues, those two elements, highlight the value of the fishery in Lough Neagh, the value of Lough Neagh as a resource, and the onus is on all of us to develop the potential that it has and to support means of securing a viable future for it. I think all too often in the past, inland fisheries to some extent within the UK are perhaps, I don't think it's overstating to say, a bit of a poor relation. You know, a lot of the talk and a lot of the publicity is around marine fisheries. You may be surprised to hear that that eels, within the context of Northern Ireland, is regularly the highest value, economic value, fin fish to be landed in Northern Ireland. It has come close, is followed closely on occasions by mackerel, but in the last 10 years it has been 7 or 8 years the highest value fish, with an economic value somewhere in the region of £3 million, which to an area, a geographical area around Lough Neagh is an important contribution to the rural economy there, and it goes much wider than just the fishermen themselves. It filters out into the community.
Sure, and I accept that, Pat, very, very much too. So my colleague across the way was former chair of the DARD committee. I was a member of that DARD committee, now dear as it is now. Yeah. I think the eel fishery in Lough Neagh is one that we all recognise, and locally here we have supported that and the opportunities that we had at that time, and I think it's good for us as a committee to hear what your thoughts are. But be assured, and I think we need to give you that assurance as well, that we're keen to ensure that the Lough Neagh eel fishery continues to be the great benefactor that it is, not just for Lough Neagh but further afield. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
It's very reassuring to hear that, Mr. Shannon. And could I just add one small comment? You asked, I think it was Andrew, a question about the funding and so on. In relation to ourselves, the funding that we currently receive goes exclusively towards restocking. And the point I need to make, Mr. Chairman, in relation to that is that, okay, you know, 50% of that comes from Europe, with 50% match funding. But the point I want to make about that's a long-term investment. We're talking about a species here which has a lifespan of close to 20 years. So, for example, we have spent probably in the region of £300,000 this year already in restocking. It will be a minimum of 6 or 7 years before we will see any return from that investment, because it will be that length of time before those fish will have reached a marketable size on the part of fishermen. Those fish, and there's a significant percentage, will escape the attention of fishermen and will have the opportunity to mature within the loch and to ripen as mature silver eels. In the case of male fish, that's on average between 10 and 12 years. In the case of female fish, it's anything up to 25 years, on average 20 years. The point I'm making is that these investments that we as a company supported by the EU and regional government in match funding, these have been long-term investments. Are we just going to write that off? You know, are we? Because we would not be in a position to do that if we did not have a commercial fishery in Lough Neagh to fund it. Okay, we're getting grant, but we also have to come forward with the balance of that money to make sure. And the other point I would make about that is that's not totally for the benefit of Lough Neagh, Northern Ireland, or indeed the UK. The spin-off from that is for the whole of Europe, because there's nothing to suggest, in the same way that salmon come back to the same feeding grounds that their parents left or whatever, there's absolutely nothing to suggest anything similar happens in the case of eels. So in other words, if we're meeting our escapement targets, as we do on an annual basis, those fish which are being allowed to escape the Lough Neagh system by good management, I might add, are making their way to the Zargosa Sea. They're breeding, they're spawning, and those juvenile fish, there's no guarantee that we'll get any sort of percentage of them back. Presumably we do, we get some percentage. But river basin districts throughout Europe are benefiting from that. If we're not there, the bigger question I have, if we're not there as a commercial fishery, who's going to manage Lough Neagh? What's it going to cost?
Can I ask, to what extent the industry in Lough Neagh is diversifying its customer base, in particular looking at the Far East and China, given the issues that you've just cited?
Yeah. these are obviously issues that we've considered, and it's fair to say there has been interest in the past from particularly Asian sources in Loch Ness eel. With the current restrictions brought about by the decline in nectar level recruitment, that's the juvenile fish coming back into the systems, it's actually not permitted currently due to the CITES regulations to export beyond EU membership. So we couldn't do it currently, even if we had logistically the capability to do it, which would be a different issue, but it's not insurmountable, it's certainly possible. It goes back to the fact that post-Brexit, the UK is also a signatory to the CITES agreement, and presumably the same rules will apply in terms of exports beyond its jurisdiction as well.
Well, that's very interesting, isn't it? So if we were looking to improve the vibrancy of your sector, I suppose, notwithstanding Brexit, we should be perhaps looking at this particular issue, respecting CITES, of course, but I think you've given a very compelling case as to how Loch Ness is able to sustain and indeed contribute to wider European eel systems. That is clearly only going to happen for as long as your sector is commercially viable. So it sounds to me as if there is a piece of work to be done around how we can deal with the restrictions placed upon the UK because it is rightly a signatory to CITES, but to enable us to promote what happens in Loch Ness and to thereby ensure the continued contribution that you make to this particular species for all the reasons set out in CITES, the reasons that we are signatories to CITES. Would that be correct, do you think?
Yes, I believe that's a correct assessment, and I might add that what happens in the management of the eel industry in Loch Ness is actually, how should I put it, it's a position of strength actually. In trade negotiations. I think we have a tremendous asset there. I believe it's been reasonably well managed. I think we've proven that over the years and decades, and I think this is a very positive footing on which we can negotiate post-Brexit.
Right, good. Thank you. That's useful. Robert Goodwin.
Thank you very much. If I could turn to Sharon. You mentioned in your earlier comments how cross-border working is going very well. I suspect you wouldn't extend that to the situation on Loch Foyle, where we've seen the oyster trestles increasing 30,000, I think I read. Do you feel that moving to a post-Brexit situation there'd be even less chance of agreement on that type of cross-border issue?
Well, for us, and I suppose we're talking here about the dispute over the maritime borders, the maritime boundaries in Loch Foyle. In 2007, we were given powers to manage aquaculture in Loch Foyle and Carlingford. Now, to date, those powers haven't been enacted, so we're looking for a document that we call the management agreement signed that would allow us as the Lochs agents to manage on behalf of both governments the aquaculture, the marine aquaculture in the Foyle. You are right, the trestles is quite a worrying issue for us, and we can only sit back and monitor what's going on. But if we had those powers, we can go in and regulate them. We have the legislation to do it. We're
and
just
is that
waiting.
Both sides of the border where we can't get agreement? Because obviously we haven't got any government structures in Ulster at the moment to actually sign anything, even if they wanted to.
Well, it's not north-south. It's east-west. This issue, it's the Department of Foreign Affairs and the Commonwealth and Foreign Office that we're waiting on. So it's not north-south. So it's the act I'm referring to is the Foyle and Carlingford Fisheries Order 2007. That gave us those powers to regulate aquaculture, which would bring, I'm told by our scientists in the agency, that what that would bring to the economy in Lough Foyle would be, they're talking in millions. You know, the benefit if we had that regulation enacted, that management agreement, which is just a system which allows us to licence and regulate the activity in regards to disease control and sustainable farming. Mm-hmm. So if we had those powers, you know, that would mean it would make such a difference in the Foyle area in regards to agriculture management. But I don't see Brexit having any difference on that, any effect on it. What we're looking for is the two governments to sign, to enable this act to be rolled out.
Post-Brexit our environmental policies might diverge, and therefore there could be technical difficulties between the management regime that either country might wish to impose?
Well, I'm going to be very cheeky here, because we have, as a cross-border body, we have the acts sitting there which allow us to do that. You know, give us the environmental powers. Nobody else can do that within Lough Foyle. We can do it. So, and this is our argument, you know, since 2007. Let us take that on. We have, we amend and write our own legislation, which obviously goes through the relevant departments and is ratified by the NSMC and so on. But we have a suite of policies and legislation and primary legislation sitting, waiting to go. But this management agreement is the crux of everything, and we could take on those environmental legislation as well.
So Sharon, who's stopping it?
We don't know. We're not party to that. We're not privy to that. All we know it's now been discussed with Department of Foreign Affairs, and I know Minister Eustace, she's asked him about the jurisdictional issue, and that he was to come back with a reply. So, but even on the jurisdictional issue, to me the management agreement is so separate. Yeah. You know, it doesn't even it doesn't need the jurisdictional issue sorted. It's not going to be. It's been there for years, but it's just the management agreement. This just needs somebody to sit down and work out the.
Are there economic factors in play?
Yes.
In terms of the value of the fishery? It isn't really an environmental issue at all. Really, it's the value of the oyster fishery.
Well, there is. We don't know, unregulated. You don't know what disease has been brought in. You don't know what effect that is going to have. Future effect is going to have on the native oysters in Lough Foyle. The economic value is it's unregulated. There is no licence fees paid. There is no encouragement to allow people to come into the industry, to set up a farm of their own and run it sustainably. But again, we will be there to help with that. And we're even now looking at putting in a broodstock project of our own in the Foyle that will help the commercial fishermen on the Foyle, you know, with the native oyster. So we see it as something very positive, and we do believe it will be a huge economic driver in that coastal area in Lough Foyle in particular. They're talking could be 20 million.
Yeah. Finally, do you think post-Brexit you need any more statutory powers, or certainly to be consulted on changes to environmental legislation?
Well, we are already consulted, and we feel we would like that to continue. As regards our environmental powers, with the management agreement we would get a substantial suite of environmental powers in regards to aquaculture licensing and regulation. So for us, it's a management agreement. Post-Brexit, you know, we would like to see that in place.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Presumably in managing these fisheries in two jurisdictions, your aim is, as it were, equality of outcome. You're aiming for a single outcome in terms of what you do, but you might have to apply different processes in either jurisdiction. Would that be correct or not? Well, as we diverge, if we diverge.
Yes, if they diverge, that's what could possibly happen. You know, the law and the environmental laws could move ahead in Northern Ireland where Ireland's left behind, or vice versa. You know, the EU moves ahead, and that could possibly happen. But for us, the Foyle Fisheries Act, it's this legislation, this unique piece of legislation we use. So we would be looking to manage and conserve and protect through that. Yes, we have looked at this in detail, and we are concerned that there could diverge, and then if we do have a case, if there is a prosecution case for pollution event, whatever, within the foil, and we act on that, and we're using a certain set of legislation, well, there is potential for cases, counter cases to come to say you don't have the powers, but actually we do. We can have if we have the management agreement.
Thanks. Lovely to see you all. Sharon, I'm almost sitting here thinking I wish you were in charge of the negotiations on Brexit between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, because it seems that you're dealing with the border.
Yes.
And you are managing with goodwill and cooperation, to make it seamless.
Yes.
Can you see that perhaps there are ways of I don't want to go into the whole rest of the political situation of the border, but I'm really asking you to agree that perhaps if there was a real unity of purpose and goodwill, a lot of the issues that are being talked about, farmers back and forward and all these kind of things, it could be solved.
Well, I can only comment on my area of which I work, and yes, and as I said, I've been working in cross-border cooperation since 2002, and I think the House of Lords Select Committee came and visited us as well and asked the question about the border. We have a huge map in the agency of Northern Ireland and Donegal in the border region, and they said, "Where's the border?" And we were going, "Oh, well, actually, it's our jurisdiction we talk about, our 3,600 kilometres of rivers that we manage and our 2 sea locks, and we manage 12 miles out to sea, so it goes into Donegal." So actually for us, we don't see the border day to day in what we do, because we're managing rivers, don't recognise borders, and neither do salmon and trout. So when we're talking, we don't talk about the border as such. So,
but both Northern Ireland Assembly and Executive, when they existed, and the Republic of Ireland government accepted this, and
yes,
so
it
can work.
1952, right. Very forward thinking at the time.
Right, Pat, could I just ask you? I understand about this. Well, I think I understand about this, the CITES stuff. But the EU is one trade bloc. Where are the other trade blocs in eels? Or are there any other?
There are no others that we have actually dealt with.
But there are others.
But there are others, particularly Asia.
Are there any other countries individually that are not that are called a trade bloc, being one country?
Not that I'm familiar with. You have to understand that in the context that the very traditional markets for eels and would be the likes of Holland and Germany. Those would have had strong eel industries of their own in the past. Particularly Holland, and for decades now, their own industries have been a bit in the doldrums, and that opened the door for Lotte and others to just. So
really, are you saying that outside the EU or outside Europe, there isn't much going on?
There's not sufficient going on, I would suggest, to absorb the sort of volumes of fish from Lotte that we need to deal in to make it a viable industry for those involved.
So you've got a tremendous asset which is sort of world renowned. I mean, isn't this a huge opportunity that you've got now to actually stretch out and reach out? And surely, what I can't understand is if, as part of the trade bloc at the moment, you're carrying out all the conservation. You're recognised as being conservation
friendly,
gold star or whatever. Why would there be a problem going back to CITES? All it needs is will from the politicians to actually go and say this has got to happen.
Yeah, well, the politicians will take their lead from the science as well, and from the scientists.
Yes, but I mean, you're conserving at the moment. What's the difference after we leave the EU on the next year?
But the scientists will look at the situation within a European context as a whole, because it's a single stock. We may very well tick all the boxes in Lotte, but because it's a single stock, the scientists at this point in time are not minded to say that there is sufficient indications of a recovery in the stocks across Europe as a whole to allow. In fact, they're not, and we have had this discussion with them and suggested to them that they should bring it down even to member state level, if not to river basin district level. If we had an assessment at river basin district level, we would be very happy because we could tick a lot of boxes, and we understand that. But at this point in time, the scientists are not prepared to accept that that would be the way forward for the species as a whole.
But isn't part of the problem, if I may, because within a single market, fish could be moved between countries without any checks. So having it as a European EU bloc is the only logical way to do it, to ensure that the species is preserved.
I agree entirely that the challenges and stresses which face the eel as a species can only be resolved by a combined effort across Europe. But I do feel that we have an important part to play in that. But yes, I agree that it's going to take a European, some sort of a joined up, whatever it is, whatever form it takes after Brexit, it's still going to require the commitment of everyone throughout Europe to make this happen.
And could it be, if I may, without the tremendous work you're doing here in Northern Ireland, the species could be put in an even more critical point on the CITES scale, because without Northern Ireland, the European species is more under threat?
Absolutely. I think I alluded to that earlier. If you take our restocking programme, for example, and I don't want to bore you with details and figures and so on, but within the past 25 years or so, this decline in the juvenile eel stocks has been evident since the mid-1980s. And we in Lotte were among the first to flag it up as potentially a danger. We hoped, like everybody else, it was a temporary blip, but we're 34, 35 years down the line since that, and we know now it was anything but a temporary blip. But yes, I mean, we have, as part of our restocking programme, and of course you have to understand, or I would like you to understand, that there's a natural recruitment continues at a reduced level, and that has been continuing down through the decades. But aside from that, we have been fortunate enough to be in a position where we had retained sufficient resources to augment that recruitment by purchasing from other areas. And to that extent, we have actually matched natural recruitment in the last 25 years with just over 100 million juvenile fish being naturally recruited and 110 million or thereabouts purchased as supplementary stock. And indeed, Mr. Chairman, if I may just take advantage, if you don't mind, just to make one further point in relation to the eel industry across Europe as a whole. I've referred to the restocking. I should explain to you that the source for those juvenile fish is also within the UK for most part. We have occasionally imported from France, but by far our greatest supplier, our largest supplier of the juvenile fish are the glass eel fisheries on the Severn, the Parrot and the Wye. And I think there's a need and a case to be made for those glass eel fishers in those areas being recognised as an important part of what we do, and vice versa.
Okay, I think I'm just. I mean, it sounds then that the EU need us more than we need them.
That's my view.
And well, I think we need to be shouting that from the rooftops, and I hope that you're going to go out there positively pushing that and getting our government to, back you up as much as possible, because it just doesn't sound like common sense again. Just moving on to Jimmy in particular. Jimmy, I'm very interested in the whole question of shellfish and lobsters. Do you fish also up on the north coast at all?
No. Due to the size of my vessel, I'm limited to about 12 to 13 mile either side of Portavogie.
Right.
And basically, the fisheries at the minute have put zones within 6A. We're either 30 at E or 30 at C up the coast, right? So we're limited in where we can go. We're limited by weather. Days at sea that affect the larger vessels to an extent. We have to do with our own days at sea. The weather dictates ours. This week, in fact, most of this winter has been easterly. If you can imagine, it's coming on a lee shore. It's not a nice place, or indeed a safe place for a small vessel to be hauling creels, and especially when the tide turns, you're exposed to broaching. So we're limited at where we can go and what we can do.
And do you have Irish registered vessels coming in to take?
We have Irish mussel vessels.
Irish
mussel vessels. There's
registered in.
The gentleman that took the court case in Dublin against the agreement and got the Northern Ireland vessels banned from Irish waters are the same gentleman that's coming into Northern Ireland waters with large mussel vessels, towing heavy dredges. We get about 12, if we're lucky, or 24 hours notice to move our gear so that they can get on the mussel beds.
And you have to do that?
Oh, apparently so. And the gear is, seed mussel is taken away and deployed either Carlingford or other places. Now, that said, there's a food chain. Crab and lobsters and stuff feed on other species, right? And as it happened in the Copeland Sound several years ago when the large fleet of mussel boats came and tore the bottom to bits, it basically destroyed the ecosystem. So there's, by being limited with weather, we're then hampered by larger vessels and a gear conflict situation arises.
I was interested in because I heard about that in the North Coast. What you do get is a lot of Irish boats coming over from Donegal that are registered in theory in Londonderry to an address.
I would call them flagships.
Yes, but actually taking the catch back to the Republic of Ireland, so the
UK
Swally, gets no taxes.
I believe some was deposited in the Swally. And in a sense, years ago, the mussel vessels was limited to a smaller size. I think it was 13 or 15 metres and a certain horsepower. They have developed into now super dredgers. Large horsepower, large thing. And every man, it's not for me to say that one other man can't have another industry. But if an area of seabed is delegated to them for seed mussels, and they catch it and then flog that seabed onto another outside agency for X amount of pounds, that defeats the purpose.
And do you think when we leave the EU and leave the common fisheries, we'll be able to try and at least challenge some of that?
I would hope that a back-to-basics approach is taken by Fisheries. The Fishery Department here, years ago, basically tried to maintain the Northern Ireland fleet at a young age, keep it healthy, keep an interest going. There was a shipyard in Bangor. They used to give extra grants. Was it 10 or 15% more?
Could be.
To build locally. That kept crafts, shipbuilding, shipwrights worked. It kept trades in the industry. When I was younger, there was 30-odd shipyards up the east coast of Scotland. Now I think we're down to 2. Macduff and
one in Scotland, one in England.
One in England. So all the coastal communities throughout the UK, both in here, Scotland, England, are losing trade. The craftsmanship, there's no kids doing apprenticeships in the shipyards. They're losing welders. They're losing the skills that's needed to keep a maritime nation afloat, right? Another worry I have when we finally do leave is there was an understanding there was to be a patrol vessel for every 600 square miles of sea. I don't think the Royal Navy has the capability at the current moment in time to police our waters. And that's something that needs to be looked at as well.
And then, Andrew, just finally, I mean, if you had to sum it all up and put it on a balance of 1 to 10, are you optimistic? Would it be, where would it be on the scale?
What result we get?
Yes, in terms of what...
We'd like a 10, but don't.
We'll be lucky to get 5.
If we get a 5, I suppose, as long as we don't go negative. So
okay.
It's there to be had if we have the political will to do it.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, there's very few in Parliament linked to the fishing, with the exception of Jim, Mr Grove, and that lady for Cornwall. So,
although I know you may not necessarily agree with it, but the organisation Fishing for Leave does attract quite a lot of MPs to come along to their
that's
meetings.
good. But I'm talking about ones from fishing communities and links to the industry.
Well, thank you very much. That was very helpful.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Thank you for your very interesting and enlightening evidence that you've been given to us. It's been very, very helpful. And indeed, Jimmy and Sharon, you both used the words about will to do this. And I think that, you know, that is the secret in all of this. If we can find the will, we will find the way. And that has to be the the kind of cri de core of what is happening in the revolutionary change that the United Kingdom is currently going through with regards to all of its industry and with its external relationships. Sharon, I think the committee should really take note of the point that you made about encouraging the FCO and the Foreign Office in the Republic of Ireland to get on with it and make that agreement and let you exercise the muscle that you have. My concern is that they've taken so long to get to this point, and there's been so much, I don't want to characterise it in the wrong way, but there's so much liberty being taken by people on the loch that's going to be the starting point that you actually start to exercise that muscle. Will you actually be able to go in and say, and challenge, and say, that has to be removed?
Well, we've talked about this as well. It would be nice to be starting with a clean slate, but obviously there is these oyster trestles there, that are increasing all the time. So we actually have talked about we would need, to go in with force, maybe even, to remove them. You would need some backup there to go in and do that, but there would definitely be a lot of legal challenges ahead. Because you're going in there and people already have land and have established an agriculture
and they've never been put on notice over the years that they've done this. So they've almost got trespassing rights as well.
This is on what we call the Inishowen side of the shore. Now in the Northern Ireland side, recently DERA did go in and issue a notice to remove. They had a few had started. So DERA did go in and they did willingly remove them. Yeah. But that was there wasn't as many.
But the really downside in all of this is if there's a poisonous batch brought in, we could wipe out our entire species.
Well,
or significantly damage an economy which you put at about 20 million.
Yeah, potential 20 million. That's based on aquaculture throughout the island of Ireland. Yeah. But it even what it does to the industry, the reputation of oysters coming from Ireland in general, from even Lough Swilly, from anywhere, within the island, that there is disease or there is a poisonous, as you said. It is a food source, and it's at the minute for us it's unregulated, food source. So and yes, it has the potential. Then our scientists talk about the carrying capacity. Yeah. Where it starts to infringe on the native oyster, the space for the native oyster and the plankton, the food for the native oyster when it's uncontrolled. So that's why it's so important to have this regulated quite. It is quite urgent now. It is actually a priority.
Does the consumer need to be educated about not taking these products?
I'm not sure on that.
I mean, obviously, if a person's growing them, they've got a market. But if that market was educated, that actually by taking that you're damaging this market, this real market, is there a merit in that, pursuing that?
Well, we don't know where that. Well, I don't know where that market is. We haven't been made aware of it. We assume it's in Europe, in the rest of Europe. It's not within. It could be Spain, France. It's not within Ireland anyway.
If you were buying oysters, where would you want to buy them from? How would you want them sourced?
Well,
I mean, you're going to tell me Dublin Bay oysters now, are you?
Well, I'll let you into a secret. I don't actually eat them. But we understand what you're saying, and definitely yes, there. I think that the recent programs and the Lochs Agency actually produced the drone footage that has been shown on several television programs, and we sent it off to the Foreign Office and the Department of Foreign Affairs, and everybody was quite shocked when they seen the extent of it, because when you're talking to somebody about it, it's just they can't imagine it until you see it.
Well, and I think it's something we can really use the pun, get our teeth into, as a committee, Mr. Chairman.
As there has been discussions, like in 2007, we were told by 2010 we would have this regime rolled out, and then it was 12. And then now it's at a stalemate. There's nothing. When we keep bringing it up at our NSMC meetings and with our sponsor branch, we liaise quite frequently with them on the matter.
In terms of additional sources of funding, you mentioned that you've been exploring issues with the Prince's Trust and Cooperation Ireland. You had received some support from Interreg, if I'm right, and you'd be worried about that drying up. Is that the case? from memory, Interreg over 6 or 7 years brought in about £300 million across the whole of the EU. But other countries who aren't in the EU could benefit from Interreg. So you could still, have you looked at exploiting Interreg if it still exists post-Brexit, of doing a co-financing programme with Interreg, like the way the Swiss do?
Well, we have thought about it, as I say, because our subject is it's a science, it's of great interest. It's an environmental. I keep saying we're a very relevant 21st century organisation. The environment and the protection of certain species, and it is a food source. So yes, we are looking at making applications with other organisations. We've explored one just recently with Portugal, who would be the lead. And it would be a research programme as well. We're looking at there. We have one at the minute now that will take us through to 2022, I think it is. If it's successful, it's due, we'll know in the next few weeks, and a sea monitor, and it's about managing the species within Loch Foyle salmon and tracking the mortality rates of the salmon. And that's in association with a wide range of countries, Canada, a university in America, working with Glasgow again.
And those countries would be co-financing with Interreg, which we could do as a nation as well. It wouldn't be an impediment.
And plus we're still in the EU as with our sponsor department.
And I think that does that programme continue post-Brexit to 2022 anyway? We still continue to benefit from that?
Well, that's what we're told, We have two schemes run at the minute where we're not lead, with Catchment Care, with Donegal Council as the lead, and various other agencies, and that's bringing us in 1.4 million over a number of years. And we're in a project called Swell, and then, as I said, Sea Monitors we would have the lead in that. It's about 5 million over 4 years. Okay,
thank you. Pat, the issues with regards to Loch Ness, absolutely right. I mean, Loch Ness eel, world-renowned product. Is the problem not that we've just taken it for granted and that we haven't actually appreciated what we have on our doorstep as a loch? And that's been one of the problems. I mean, the constant thing which I hear, and don't take this the wrong way, Pat, constant thing that I hear from community associations, those around Loch Ness, are it never meets its full potential. And is that down to the fact that really it's not appreciated for what it could achieve? And this is maybe an opportunity to help us reach the full potential?
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with any of that. I think Loch Ness has tremendous potential. And yes, one of the elements associated with Loch Ness is obviously as a source of food, and I'd be the first to accept that that's not been something that has been flagged up sufficiently down through the years. I think we have in the last 3 or 4 years begun to change that and to reach out, and we've had open days, and we've attended various events and all the rest, and I think that has changed. And I often say that I'm amazed, and it actually relates to what you've just said. If you move sort of 10 miles beyond the shoreline of Loch Ness, it's remarkable how little people really know about the asset on its doorstep.
Yep.
I think that's...
Do you know I face the same problem in Bushmills?
Yeah.
Where I have people in Bushmills have never been to the Giant's Causeway.
Yeah. Yeah, it's exactly the same.
When it's on your doorstep, it's almost it's less appreciated.
You take it for granted, or you don't have a particular interest. And I think in our particular case, that has been exacerbated by the fact that we're exporting all the time. There was no local market, and we weren't really doing anything to promote the local market. I think we're not a nation of fish eaters, possibly. Anyhow, certainly not eel eaters.
No, not eels. No, definitely.
I think there's a certain aversion to the very look of an eel. Yeah, you're quite right, and this is something that we have been trying to address, but I think Loch Ness is a bit of a jewel for the province, really, and it does need to be talked about.
It needs to be exploited more. There's absolutely no doubt about it. I mean, that's the thing which I always have picked up about it. But I also think we don't look at it from the other point of view. I mean, if I were the Dutch, I'd be screaming in Barnier's ear, you better sort this issue with the eels out for us. Because they don't. If this collapses, if you get the cliff edge, if this collapses, it's the Dutch who lose out here, and the Germans.
Yeah.
And, so maybe they are screaming in his ear about it, and he's just being clever by not saying anything and making us look as if we're the ones in trouble.
Possibly are, but we have to understand that the product they buy from us is not their total import. It's not. They also would have eel farms, for example, on the continent, including Holland, which are much closer to them and therefore can supply them much cheaper. And there's been huge developments in the agriculture or the farming of eels in recent years, to the point where the gap between the natural product from Loch Ness and what they can now produce on farms is actually closed. Now, it's not there, it'll never be there as far as I'm concerned. And Loch Ness eel will always command a bit of a premium in that regard, and there is a demand there. I think eel and the problems that the stocks have had in recent years has had an effect on consumers. Yeah. There's been a lot of bad publicity, a lot of negativity about it, and that has to be addressed.
Yeah. But there's definitely a marketing job to be done.
There's a huge
I don't know, maybe if you can get some sort of trendy chef to do something with eels that actually attracts the local consumer to say, I want to try that as a product. Well, I mean, who would have had 20 years ago scallops on a plate? Yeah. People wouldn't have touched them, and now they are the thing which everyone wants.
I think because of the work that we've done with the food service industry, I think we do have great advocates, amongst the food service industry. Just before it slips in your mind, a point you had raised earlier about Loch Ness and the fact that it has tremendous potential and all the rest. There's one point I would make to you, and that is that I think historically Loch Ness has suffered from the lack of let's call it a joined-up approach to the management of the loch.
You've 6 councils touching it.
Yeah.
Who's in charge?
Exactly. But even at a different level, you take it at a stakeholder level, for example. There's so many agencies and government bodies and community groups and all the rest, and nobody has ever sat down to see if they could pull all this together. Now, there was a movement towards community ownership in the past couple of years with the Development Trust. Unfortunately, because we don't have an assembly in place at the moment, that's sitting there. I think that's an awful shame, because there's been a huge amount of work done on that, and I think that had the potential to bring stakeholders and community interest groups together to make much more of the loch. But crucially, I think the one thing it does require is investment in infrastructure. Accessibility to the loch is not great.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Jimmy and Andrew, infrastructure. The period that we have between exiting the EU in March next year through to the final closing of the door and walking away, we have an opportunity during that period to look at infrastructure. What infrastructure would you like Her Majesty's Government to be looking at in your area to help sea fisheries?
We'll have plans for a new harbour in Kilkeel, and if we could develop that, it obviously would there's potential to bring a lot more ships in for repairs and bring more fish and stuff into the market. If you can create a hub someplace, you'll attract more business and you'll attract more ships, but you have to put the infrastructure in there to start that. That's the way we're seeing it all around Europe. There's a hub in Norway, or a hub in Skagen in Denmark, where all the fish markets is, all the factories are coming to it, and that's what you need to do in Kilkeel, is to try and start someplace that you can attract more businesses and more ships, and you can get a repair business up and going.
Jimmy?
That said, we have 3 ports in Portavogie, and I would like to see investment continue in all 3.
Narglass, Portavogie.
Yes. Portavogie's potential is the most easterly. Currently, at the moment, I would say maybe one of the safest harbours. It was dredged recently. Has potential, if the wind farm industry was to start, we have potential for berthing, offshore work, and we can work 365 days a year, God willing, not dependent on tide. If you go around Ireland as a whole, you will see that investment has been put into Killybegs, Fennet, Castletown, Bear, every other major port on the west coast. Northern Ireland investment lately has been very limited. Every small jetty in Ireland has a 5-ton crane, right? As a safety measure too, that if a small creel boat hits the rocks and gets a hole, he can get into the harbour, get a strap around him and get him lifted out. As it stands at the minute in Portavogie, we have no means. We have one slip now.
We saw that today, and the point was made to us by the Chief Executive Officer about the smaller slip bay, and for all the money it would take.
Very, very little to get that back in business.
Yeah.
Even we've nowhere. We've no safe refuge. We've no means to get our boats out. And if the slips is very much in demand of keel, so that puts more pressure on the one that's left in Portavogie. And where the smaller vessels was able to go onto the wee slip, as we used to call it, it's no longer there.
Yep.
So we need to start reinvesting.
You made a very good point, which I don't think had been made to any of us before, and that was about the college system and getting young people,
starting the school,
pushed that way. I think that is a point which is worthy for us to note.
When I went to school many years ago, even the fishing was frowned upon then, and it was, I suppose, in its better days. What are you going to that for?
Yeah.
Maths was boring sums, but yet when we left school we had to study navigation, whereas there could be a day of coastal studies which could cover environment, aquaculture. We need to start again, both at the fisheries and in the education, as to we are a coastal state. To remain a coastal state, we need ships, we need shipyards, we need the facilities to keep those up and running.
I had to take my boat till Fraserburgh to get repairs done because there's no place big enough in Northern Ireland to do it. Well, Harlands can do it, but they're busy. They used to go to Dublin. It's closed now, so you have the whole east coast. There's not a dry dock. You can take a bigger ship. So if you have that, if they built a dry dock in Kilkeel or Ardglass or Portavogie, where there's, it'll attract work. It'll attract passing trade.
It was only to the Napoli disaster that they realised we've a big tanker here. Where can we put this into a dry dock? And if Belfast hadn't have been there, they were planning, I believe, to build apartments around it at the time. Thankfully, the government has the sense now to put an order on it, protect it for 100 years. If we fill in all our dry docks, which has happened around Newcastle and places like that there, we're an island nation, we need ships, we need places to repair them.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, and particularly thank you for your reference to the Royal Navy, and I can only wholeheartedly agree
I didn't
with
mean
you.
any offence in that, but I was being realistic.
No, I think you're very realistic, and I'm very sure that most naval officers would say that we have too few hulls, and in particular too few small hulls, and patrol boats are an exceptionally important part of that. And I think you're absolutely correct in your assessment of the UK's capacity currently to protect its own waters. Yes, absolutely. Can I bring us back to the subject of workforce? This morning in Portavogie, we met some extremely nice people from Ghana and from Lithuania and had a chat with them. And it's very clear that the industry is heavily dependent upon non-indigenous labour right now, part of which is European. I suppose the question, it's for Andrew and Jimmy principally, is do you have any concerns, or what extent do you have concerns about the sustainability of that workforce post-Brexit? What can be done about it? And how can we make it easier to attract workers both from the European Union and from outside the European Union after the 29th of March next year?
It's very difficult even to get Filipino workers into the UK for our boats. My brother deals with it all, bringing the few people we have in, but he has to jump through hoops to get it, and we're living, everything we've done is above board, but the border force comes in and scoops the men, takes them away home on the gate, because it's really hard to build a business without your crew. And if you were able to get crew and know you get crew, well then you can build a business. So the Filipinos and the Lithuanians, is very important at the minute. till us. We have 2 wee boats and we have 2 or 3 in each boat. So,
to what extent have you noticed a reduction in the appetite of people from the Baltic states and Eastern Europe to come to the UK to work in fishing? I mean, the reasons for such a thing would be multiple. Perceived lack of attractiveness of the UK, lack of friendliness of the UK because of Brexit perhaps, not terribly convincing, but nevertheless a reduction in the value of the pound against the euro, and of course prosperity back home.
Maybe, I don't know what's going on back home for them, but the few guys we had from Lithuania, we have a couple there with us for years, 5 or 10 years they're with us and they're still there. But I think the pound being weaker, when the pound was stronger, they were sending more money home and they were doing better that way.
Yeah.
But
to what extent then would it be more attractive, for example, for them to work in the Republic of Ireland right now rather than the United Kingdom?
Well, I don't necessarily know that their boats, like-for-like boats, is going to make any more money, because it's just down to what the boat catches, you know. So I can't say that they're actually going to make any more money.
But they'll be paid in euros.
They make it in euros, not pounds. But most things is relative.
The border force needs to take an even-handed approach to crewing as a whole. They previously issued an exemption for fishermen, which ran out a couple of years ago. They have recently issued an exemption for Filipino seamen to serve on the wind farm vessels. Now, what's the difference? A Filipino on a UK boat, be it a windcat boat or a fishing boat. He's coming into a UK port and he's no time in, 5-6 hours, and he's back at sea again. Yes, I can understand the 12 mile stay out. This is the Irish Sea we're fishing. 12 mile from Port of Ogie, you're near enough in Manx waters. There's 26 mile between the place. So let's be realistic. A wee bit of common sense. Take an even-handed approach to employment of all seafarers within the UK, but vet them properly.
There's been a lot of boats sold in Northern Ireland this last while, mainly down to not getting crew. The same thing's happened in the Clyde, because it's enclosed. You can't get outside 12 mile limit in the Clyde. The west coast of Scotland is the same. The boats have Filipino crew can't go and fish there because they're all frightened of the border force pouncing on them and lifting their crew. So they're forced to fish places that aren't as productive as long as it's outside 12 miles. And places that is productive, where they used to traditionally go, they can't go because they're frightened of losing their crew. So it's not a very good situation, the way it is at the moment. And
but the long term, we need to start bringing up our own youngsters
back into
the industry, be it fishing or commercial.
And other than trying to upskill them around, I mean, we're talking in the modern parlance around apprenticeships, I suppose, certainly something involving formal FE, further education. What would you say we could do to make the industry more attractive? Because I think most of us this morning were struck. It was a beautiful day, but it looked like really hard work to me. So that puts off a lot of people.
Well, they give bursaries for teaching training and things like that there. They give bursaries for nursing. Why can we not have some type of bursary for, like the Slater Fund, for example, for fishing? You know, we need to make it encouragement, some type of goal that, yes, you can get your certificate. Once you get your certificate, the world becomes your oyster. You can go to the merchant, you can go to liners, you can go to tankers. At the minute, some pursers in the east coast of Scotland is working with exemptions because they can't get Class 1 marine engineers. So we need to start, if we leave Europe, we need to put an educational programme in place that there's training available for fishing, the wheelhouse, the deck department, and the engine department. We need to look at it in the broad spectrum.
Okay.
We need to be able to give our crew more money. So we do.
Is that the elephant in the room?
That's the whole thing. If you can give the crew good money, you're going to attract people to it. There was a boom fishing here 40, 50 years ago. People that was never at the fishing were going to the fishing because there was so much money.
They were leaving their trades to
go. They're coming from Belfast, the middle of Northern Ireland, everywhere to Kilkeel and Port.
We joined the common fisheries policy.
Yeah, yes, about that time.
Over
Pat, did you want to come in?
But that days will not come. But
No.
Well, what goes around comes around. We'll see, Pat.
Mr. Chairman, what Jimmy has been talking about sort of resonates with us in Lough Neagh. It's a different situation, obviously, about labour from elsewhere and so on. That doesn't affect us in with regard to the fishing crews themselves. Potentially it could, in relation to further processing, which we have undertaken in the last year or so. And we actually have a few, we don't have a huge workforce to start with, but we have a few Eastern Europeans, largely because, well, the individuals in question would have been here for a number of years and they had the skills that we required, and there isn't an abundance of those skills. But the point that Jimmy and Andrew have been making with regard to, if you like, providing incentives for fishermen, there's no disguising the fact that we in Lough Neagh have a fishing community whose age profile is way too high. We're not attracting younger people into the industry, and I think that's sad, because Mr. Beasley's referred to, the fact that the fishing industry in Lough Neagh is a bit of a gem and that it's been well known globally and all the rest. I think it would be an awful shame to lose that. But if we're not to lose it, we have to do something about attracting younger people in. Ultimately, I think you referred to this yourself, it's all about making it worth their while. We have come from an area where historically alternative employment opportunities have not been that thick on the ground, and a lot of people by necessity became fishermen then. I think that has changed in recent years. There have been better opportunities. More fishermen's families have gone on to third level education and broadened their horizons and all of that. And maybe in some ways the fishing industry has been a victim of its own success. Nevertheless, there is a problem on the horizon that needs to be addressed. And I'm thinking in terms here, we can provide incentives, for example, for young farmers to become involved in the businesses. Do we need to be looking at doing the same for fishermen families?
Okay. That's very helpful. Thank you. Robert.
One of my time MP for Scarborough and Whitby, one of the skippers from Whitby, said he'd heard of a scheme in, I think it was Denmark, where if a young person is recruited, they get some additional quota to go with that. I don't know if anyone was aware of that and whether that would work here.
But they do seem, in Europe, they do seem to work with their fishermen more to encourage the industry. They do seem to push the boundaries or push the rules more to suit the people, the locals. So,
I know in agriculture there's nothing like a new tractor to help you attract new staff. I mean, there's some very old boats in the harbour we saw today. Do you think that might be part of the problem as well? People want to be working in high-tech new vessels.
It certainly should help.
It's a safety issue. If you were to ask the Marine Accident Investigation Board as to one of the largest causes of sinking, it's flooding. It's pipework. Boats have been neglected. Older vessels have come to Ireland, and that was it. Like I say, they were at the end of their days elsewhere. They need investment. They need fixed. You need something safe to go to sea on. If a vessel's not safe, you're putting your crew at danger. And personally, I wouldn't put my certificate on the line for any unsafe vessel. You've got to make it encouragement. Share fishing is like gambling. What you catch, you get a share of. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. It's not a 9-to-5 job. Working hour regulations is kicked in within the merchant fleet. 77 hours a week. You can't work a man like a slave, but when you haul your net, you've got to tidy up what's on the deck. So what regulations apply in a merchant vessel, maybe not apply in a fishing vessel, because you are self-employed on the whole. It needs to be looked at in a lot of input and a wide scope. But hopefully, once we leave, those in charge will do it.
Well, thank you very much indeed. That's been very comprehensive. Just to finish off, I wonder if there's anything you think we might have missed in our ever so gentle interrogation this afternoon, which you stood up to extremely well, I should add. Anything perhaps we should know about, think about, perhaps Mr. Gove should think about as he prepares to launch his much-awaited fisheries bill?
Well, Pat's concerned that there's no one agency looking after the whole loch. the good lady sitting to his right could maybe take it on too.
I think on the positive side, the one thing I would like to stress in that context is the connection between Northern Ireland and GB with regard to the industry, the supply of glass seals to Lotte, and so it's all part of the same system. I think there's a side of this issue that needs to be looked at as a whole UK issue. And I think, again, to stress that we've nothing to hide with our real industry. In fact, we should be shouting about it, as Mr. Paisley has suggested, and I think it's a position of strength for us going forward post-Brexit.
I think we feel too that it should be the UK fishing industry. The Scotch Surfery have a very good lobbying and a good team of working with the Scottish Government. I think if there's benefits to come, they need to come for the whole of the UK, not just one area over another area. As Jimmy said earlier, different licence, different things. You can fish the same place and have different rules, and we're still all in the UK. So I think we need a more UK base.
Similar to what BIM had in the Republic in the 50s, where it was an open and even playing field for everybody. The quota was there for everybody. The licences was there for them that wanted it, and the boats was available if they wanted them. Okay. We need to go back to basics and start rebuilding our fleet.
Okay. Good. I think that's come across very strongly today. Today has been, I think, a day of reflection, certainly for the members of the committee. There's a lot for us to think about, and what you've contributed this afternoon has certainly provided a great deal for us to think about, and will definitely enrich the quality of our report when we come to complete it in the very near future. So thank you very much indeed for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be with us this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for allowing us to do so. Good job.